Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Archaeology After Dark. I'm, of course, your host, Daniel Rhodes. My guest today is Stacy Hawthorne. Stacy, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So, continuing with our theme of archaeology, our massive theme of archaeology, but also, as you've heard me say in earlier episodes, it is National Archaeology Month. So, I've invited our state archaeologist to talk to us a little more about the events and different things going on in Alabama. So, Stacy, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started.
About me personally, or about my position as state archaeologist, or both?
Both. Why not?
Okay. Well, personally, I graduated, or I have 2 degrees from Auburn, so did both degrees there. Long time ago. Been working for the Alabama Historical Commission for 20 years, 15 of which I've been the state archaeologist. I started out reviewing Section 106, I guess, I'll talk more about when we get into what I do as state archaeologist, and then went up to coordinating that program, and then became state archaeologist. So I have 2 daughters. Both are college. Well, one just graduated from Auburn, and the other is a junior at the University of Alabama. So that's, I guess, personally. Um, as far as state archaeologist, I'm the state archaeologist with the Alabama Historical Commission, and describing my duties is kind of it's a very eclectic sort of mixture of duties. One of the perks is that you just never get bored. You sort of come in with my list of what I'm going to do today, and then the crisis of the day takes over, and I find out, by the end of the day, I've done everything but that. But I think a lot of people can identify with that. Yeah, let's see, I'm the head of the archaeology division, and one of our major functions is to review projects for Section 106. And that's basically, I don't know if you've covered that on here before, have you? Or do you
Not yet. I'm working my way around to it. We just did an episode on repatriation with Kelly Bowers a couple weeks ago.
I saw that. It was excellent. Okay, so Section 106 is essentially, it's part of the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. It's essentially a law that says your tax money shouldn't go to destroy your heritage. And incidentally, Albert Raines, who was a legislator from Alabama, was one of the most instrumental people in bringing the National Historic Preservation Act to fruition, which I find I'm very proud of that fact. But so that, after, I'm sure everybody saw the film The Monuments Men after World War II, people became more aware of how public money was going to destroy heritage sites. And he was part of a group that got together and established the laws that we still use today to protect historic resources. But, what that looks like, ideally, it's, your tax money shouldn't go to your heritage, to destroy your heritage. What that translates to is that we have a division of archaeologists and architect historians here at the Historical Commission, and we review every federal undertaking in the state to see if it's going to affect historic resources, either archaeological or historic buildings or bridges or that kind of thing. So, that translates to about a little over 2,000 new projects a year. But of course, the whole time we're working on old projects as well, because, we have everything from, we're going to put the cell tower up and it's going to affect this little postage stamp area, or we're going to have this big highway project that lasts for 20 years. So, some of those projects just keep going and going and get bigger and bigger. So that's one of the major functions that we do, is that we review those projects. We look at probabilities for archaeological sites. We recommend surveys or not. And then if there are surveys, there are guidelines that you have to meet in order for those surveys to meet state and federal standards. So when surveys are done, we review to ensure that they've met those standards. And then, of course, that, if it goes into further research, like an excavation, we look at research designs and proposals, and then make sure that the work that results, is a good product that satisfies the agreement that we've all had with the agencies. So that's a huge portion of what we do. We also have state preservation laws. and we deal with those. One of them is the Alabama Burial Act, which was upgraded in 20, you mentioned NAGPRA. Our state burial law originally exempted Native American burials. I don't think that was that was perceived as sort of a racist thing. I don't think that's where it came from. I think it came from not wanting to punish farmers and people who accidentally discovered Indian burials that were part of archaeological sites. But of course, it was recognized that that's not how it came about. So now the law protects all human remains. Makes it a felony to disinter human remains that are not, if you're, it's not part of an archaeological project, or it's not permitted, or you're not an official like a coroner. And then the law also protects, it's always protected the things that go with graves, like, everything from the monument to the grave to the, what's actually inside the casket with the person. But it was expanded to, once that we were thinking about Native American interments, it includes not only their accoutrements and their burials, but it includes, anything that was built as a monument to them. So, if there's an earthwork or a cairn or something like that, that's also protected by the law. And anything that's planted there that was a monument to the dead. So we have that we deal with, and we have a cemetery coordinator that deals with permits to rehab, do work in cemeteries. I generally don't get involved unless there's going to be ground disturbance, but we manage those projects. We interpret the Alabama Underwater Cultural Resources Act. So which gives us the stewardship of any cultural resources in Alabama state waters. And that was created in response to the Abandoned Shipwrecks Act. Used to, the federal government owned all of the shipwrecks, and then they said, hey, let's let the states have jurisdiction over the non-military craft. And so we have that responsibility for both those and any archaeological sites that are in state waters, which is how I got involved with my biggest project right now, which is the Clotilda.
Yeah, I was just about to bring that up. That is something, people have been talking about in Alabama for at least the first time I'd heard about somebody working on it was the Gulf Shores meeting we had in 2019.
Yes, well, I've been working with personally, and the agency's been working on the Clotilda for longer, because there were permits they given to historians and monitored by this office before I even came to work here, looking for it. It was, if you read William Foster's, people call it his journal, I think it's actually notes from an interview with him. But if you read them, he, I lost my train of thought. Where were we going? What?
It happens. Shipwrecks.
Oh, okay. So he says in his interviews, his interview notes, that he was that he sank it in Bayou Canot, and so every survey that we had looked at Bayou Canot. And it wasn't until we were responding to the discovery of the 12 Mile Island wreck that we realized, through doing the background map work, that we all do in archaeology, that area of the river, which is now not considered Bayou Canot, was historically considered Bayou Canot. So that's when we did the maritime, the remote sensing survey that identified the ship's graveyard, that Clotilda is the oldest vessel in, but there are, I think, 14 vessels at least in that mile stretch of the river. It's a ship's graveyard, which is on the National Register now in its own right. The Clotilda is listed as part of that district, archaeological district, and then it has its own nomination and will probably eventually be a National Historic Landmark. And then we also, at the same time, very near there, are the CSS Huntsville and Tuscaloosa, which are ironclads that were sunk as obstructions during the Civil War. And those were excavated in the 80s, but they're still there. So, resources that we know about, like those ironclads, the Tecumseh, we check on them periodically just to make sure, because if they're covered with anaerobic mud, that's the best thing we can do to preserve them. And so, we just kind of check, make sure they're still covered in mud and they're safe. And so we did that, and then recorded a couple of jetties that were built in 1850, which were early engineering. I guess a lot of people would consider that interesting, but I find it very interesting to early examples of engineering and trying to control the environment. So it's been a very interesting study all the way around. Of course, the world is excited about the Clotilda story, which is unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
We put Africatown on the National Register in 2010, which is when I started working with the community pretty regularly. And that story is just phenomenal. I couldn't believe that it wasn't already widely known. And the fact that, our discovery has been our discovery is probably a wrong word. That vessel had been there for years and was actually listed as a hazard on maps. So discovery is the wrong word. Our identification of that vessel as definitively being the Clotilda. I think that, I love that it's finally brought attention to a story that we all should. I mean, the triumph over adversity that community has achieved again and again is just very inspirational.
So it's less of a discovery and more of a rediscovery.
Well, isn't all of archaeology?
Yeah, exactly. And that, folks, is why we're here, rediscovery.
Well, and I think one of the really important points, as we're talking nitty-gritty archaeology, is that the scientific process, the process of elimination, and the popularity of Clotilda has given us the opportunity to reiterate that over and over again about how we don't go in and go, hey, look, this is what we have, and then try to prove it. What we do is we try to prove that that's not it. The null hypothesis is that and we look at what we have left standing after we've knocked everything down that we possibly can, and that's what we did here. Is, we did a survey, we looked at the whole district, one by one. We were left with with one vessel that could possibly be it. Every question we've asked, the answers come out of yes. So we feel really confident that it's it's the right vessel form, it's the right time period, it's the right construction materials, it's in the right location. And then the fact that somebody tried to burn it in the 50s, or tried to dynamite it in the 50s. Now we're seeing structures in the hull that could be possibly put there for that voyage, specifically for that voyage, some sort of containment. Nothing like everybody always asks me, have you found shackles? No. But we have not excavated the entire hull. But there are some structures. There's a bulkhead there that it's supposed that would have been there when they were transporting lumber around the Gulf.
So the Clotilda is still an ongoing excavation, right?
It is, and I'm sure it will live longer than my tenure as state archaeologist. These things tend to go. I mean, look at the Hunley. That's a popular thing that most people have read about. And I'm not saying we're going to bring Clotilda up like they brought Hunley up, but I mean that's ongoing now, and that's a much smaller vessel. It was in much better shape. It hadn't been vandalized like the Clotilda had, and it's all metal. It's not a compound artifact. The Clotilda is, it was burned to the waterline. It was sank. It's had dynamite thrown on it. It's in at least 2 pieces. Part of it's still buried. So, we're still. Where we are right now is just trying to determine what is the best thing for the preservation of the vessel. So this last phase where we did all the field work in May, we were collecting a lot of things that don't excite a lot of people. Sediment cores for engineers to look at, a lot of biological samples, environmental DNA to see what kind of bacteria and are inhabiting the wreck, and how those are going to affect its preservation, the fluctuations in water levels and water salinity, because we're in an area that it's both tidal, and you have the rivers, the 5 rivers emptying down into that area, so the salinity changes quite dramatically. All that's
Yeah, that was one thing I was thinking when I had heard, the original story of the Clotilda. Is the place that I understood it to be was like brackish water, where it is like a subtle shift between fresh water and salt water.
right. That's exactly what it is. And of course, I don't have all of the data right yet. We will have soon. But of course, it's going to take time, even when we get the report. Of course, everything that we're doing is permitted by the Corps of Engineers, because as you know, if you move sediment in water, you need a permit from the Corps. And so, we'll get a report, we'll review it, they'll review it. It's going to be we've had everything we've done peer reviewed internationally. We want to make sure that we're doing the absolute best science possible. And then at that point, everything will be shared with the community before we come out. So it's still going to be a while. And we still have some outstanding specialized analysis. Nothing, earth shattering, a type of pollen that we haven't, don't recognize from either Alabama or Africa. And a piece of material that we don't know what it is, that we didn't have that in our research design. We found it, we had to send it off after the fact. So not very fair to ask that lab to meet the same deadline that everybody else had been on board from the beginning.
Yeah, you can't exactly just, ship a thing to somebody and be like, hey, we want to know what the thing is. And they're like, we don't know what the thing is either.
Right.
It's different. It's neat. We
And
don't know what it is, but it's neat.
And that's another, of course, I have a lot of experiences trying to translate the nature of archaeology to the business world in Section 106. But, people are not familiar with, we're always dealing with an unknown, and, especially when budgets come about, people want things to be predictable. And you can't, it's under the ground, or it's under the muddy water. And we have very good predictive models based on past research, but you really just don't know until you get in there, even when you have some sort of remote sensing like ground penetrating radar, or the side scan sonar and magnetometry that we use in maritime. I mean, you have to ground treat that before you ever know. It's a good tool for avoidance. If you say we've got a cemetery and we want to know how many unmarked graves there are, it's good. It's a very good tool, because you're going to avoid it. But just about anything else, I think you don't know until you do a little bit of excavation.
I would get out there and I'd be like, well, it is definitely a ship. There is sand, water, and this is not what I do.
I wish it was sand and water. This is swamp. This is 0. I think 3 inches is the best visibility they've had. So it's muddy, murky. When I was in my waders up on the bank, it's like your waders get pulled down and your feet get pulled up in the legs of your waders. It's that kind of mud that sucks you down.
Yeah, I remember talking to a guy. For the life of me, I can't remember what his name was, but he was with the University of West Florida, and he was not working.
Cook or John Bratton, probably.
Yeah, and he was telling me a story how it had rained really bad one day, and he's standing on the bank and he thinks he sees all these logs flowing down the river, but it is a flock of alligators. And I'm like, no, never going out there. Absolutely not.
Yeah, we had a situation where we were, we had done the survey, and we were systematically diving the targets that were identified in the survey. Or I say I was on the boat. We had search divers in the water, and they use a helmet. It's not like the regular scuba, it's a whole helmet, so they can communicate with somebody on the boat. And so one of the divers was in the water and the other one's on the boat. I look and I see a log, and then I realize the log's coming diagonally upstream from across the river. I was like, hey, that ain't a log. You better get him out of the water.
Yeah, that's going in. That's going in the field report. Beware
Exactly.
of alligators.
Yeah, and when we responded to the 12 Mile Island wreck that was mistakenly identified as the Clotilda, I had used all volunteers because, at this point we're able to plan for Clotilda. We know about it. We can ask for money. We can put it in the budget. Any kind of discoveries are not in our budget. We just have to respond. And I had a situation of where, we could kind of tell that this vessel was too large because we have the registration papers for Clotilda and also the vessel form, because this was visible above the waterline, looked like a later vessel, which it turned out to be. But we still, there had been an article produced that says, this is something that's really important that a lot of people want to be a part of. And right here's the location. So, as stewards of every cultural resource, even though we knew it wasn't Clotilda, we had a responsibility to respond and record this because it very easily could have been vandalized or destroyed. And so I put together this whole team of people that came. But the Submerged Resources Center from the National Park Service and the Southeastern Archaeological Center responded immediately, and then Search volunteered and helped us out with that as well. So, and University of West Florida came up one day even when we were looking at that. But anyway, so the point being is that I'm in the water there and my waders with a lot of people from, it's Slave Wrecks Project sent Kamal Siddiqui also. So I'm in the water with these people from, different parts of the United States. And somebody looks at me and goes, "You don't have snakes here, do you?"
We have all the snakes here. How do people not know this?
I was like, we're like Australia light. We've got lots of poisonous things. So anyway, but so I guess back to the duties of the state archaeologist. We have a number of properties around the state. Some are open to the public. There are a few that are not, which are mainly the buildings that our offices are in. So they're technically open to the public, but they're not interpreted as historic resources for the public. But anytime we're going to do ground disturbance on any of those properties, we monitor that. We review it. Just they're historic sites that are there for the public, so we're certainly not going to destroy the archaeology process of getting a new water line or something like that. We occasionally get interpretations on those sites. You and I, when we were talking earlier, mentioned the State House at Oklahoma, so we did those excavations ahead of the bicentennial and had and building the interpretation there at the State House. So that kind of thing. We do outreach and education, which is what we're talking about now with Archaeology Month, and then outreach and education on those properties, those historic properties. We have an archaeology lab, which I manage. The AHC Archaeological Repository is at Fort Toulouse, but we house, and the largest part of those collections are from Fort Toulouse because there were excavations there for the bicentennial. A lot that was done in the 70s, so we house all those artifacts there, but also anything from that's archaeological from our other properties. That would, anything that's not archaeological, of course, is especially if it's a house museum, is at the property itself, like, Belmont is up in your area. But we have those, so we meet there and analyze and work on those artifacts about every other week, trying to, aiming to be up to standards since we're the ones that review the standards for everybody else. Not, on any given days, there could be another, we answer calls from the public, people who are concerned about resources and work with the Archaeological Conservancy to try to get those resources preserved. We work with Native American tribes. They're just, it's something different every day almost.
So we've talked a lot about Archaeology Month today over the past couple of weeks, and there is a calendar of events. Stacy, what are some events that are upcoming?
Okay, well, I'm gonna have to read. I'm gonna have to look at my notes. Sorry. So, I mean, I guess just this weekend, right now, the Moundville Archaeology or Indian Festival's ongoing.
That goes until Saturday, I think.
Yes, yes. So, and it says their hours are 8:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. and the tickets are $10. Old Cahaba Archaeological Park is having their haunted history tours this weekend and next weekend. I think they may be sold out though. But
yeah, so you guys, if you want to go on that one, you do need to call the park and double check with them. I saw on Facebook within probably the past week or two that they are sold out, but you might want to double check that one.
Well, and there may be, I don't know what they do about cancellations, but anyway, it's really good. It's of course that's one of our properties, and you know, maybe I'm a little bit biased, but when I've traveled over the years, I've tried to do other ghost tours because I just kind of want to know how ours is compared. And I really think that we have one of the best ghost tours I think it's the best, but I'm going to be more modest and say one of the best. But you get both the sort of, my favorite thing is I grew up on Catherine Tucker Wyndham's stories. And so I love that kind of story, ghost story with historical background kind of thing. And so, you know, when you do the cemetery tour, you get that. And then you go into the Barker slave dormitory and you get the paranormal investigation as well. So I definitely recommend it. If you
it's October. We have to recommend the ghost tours, the historic ghost tours, anything scary. We are all for it on this program.
I'm already Halloweening. It's a little wearing my little spider. I love Halloween. So okay, and also on Saturday, I am participating. Jim Delgado and I. Jim Delgado is our contract, the head maritime archaeologist that we've contracted with Search and then Resolve Marine for the Clotilda excavation. So Jim is the lead archaeologist from our contractor. So he and I are going to be on a virtual panel hosted by the Archaeological Institute of America. It's at 12 p.m. and it's free, but I think you're supposed to sign up because I keep getting emails about how many people are signed up. So I think you need to sign up for that. But it's on the Archaeological Institute of America website. I think you'll be able to sign up for that, and it's free. Tannehill Ironworks State Park is having trade days this weekend. So and there is an admission, $5 for seniors, $4 for children, and then from 6 to 11 are $3, and under 5 are free. So, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Adults are $5, seniors $4, children $3, and under 5 are free. Florence Indy Mound Museum, it has the Young Learner series at 10 a.m. And this is actually about freshwater mussels. And for those of you thinking, well, it's not archaeological, that's the reason that the Florence Mound is there. so yes, freshwater learning more about freshwater mussels will help you learn about an archaeological site. Then also this weekend is the Ridge Project Interpretive Center is having a countywide field trip, and that's 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. and that's also free. Now that's just this weekend. I don't know when you're going to air this. Do you want to go further? Because we have a whole other page of stuff.
I'll probably post it later today. So however far down the list you want to go. I know you mentioned something at Fort Toulouse next month. That's Frontier Days, right?
That always starts the first Wednesday in November. So that's November 2nd to 5th this year. And
Okay.
there is an adult admission is $10, students $7. And then I would like to mention that on the 20th, which is next week, or Dr. Ashley Demas is doing a presentation at Archives and History. It's their series where they have lectures at lunch called Food for Thought. And she's going to be talking about her work looking for the Mabila site, which is also, one of the holy grails of Alabama archaeology, much like Matilda. So I love following Ashley's research. She does a fantastic job on everything that she puts her mind to. And, I'm very excited about this work that she's doing. So I think that's important. There's a Pope's Tavern Archaeology. I'll just go through them now since we started talking. October 20th is the Pope's Tavern Archaeology Club orientation at 6 p.m. October 22nd, Halloween at the Archaeology Museum at the University of South Alabama. Their Center for Archaeological Studies has a lot of activities planned. So, if you miss one, you live in that area, you have another opportunity. Or even if you can't come to one of the events, that's a small archaeological museum, but it's very well done and it's packed with information. And I don't know if they're still there, but they did have one of the best historic map collections. And so you could kind of, there was a room that you could walk around and view a lot of those maps as well. And I could just spend hours in there. Let's see, there's Lochapoka Surf Sopping Festival is October 22nd. Teresa Paglione will make sure that there's an archaeological display there, I'm sure. And then I have a presentation on Clotilda that we've talked about very heavily for the Huntsville chapter of the Archaeological Society. That's on October 25th at the Madison County Public Library, and it's at 5:30 p.m. and that's also free. The Shoals Archaeological Stewardship Series, October 28th, which is virtual. Anna Mulligan, who's the archaeologist with Oakville Indian Mound Park, will be the presenter, and that's at 12 p.m. That's free. Let's see. Another University of South Alabama lecture on the 29th is Mobile Creole Cultural Preservation Society lecture series. At the James Sills Junior Community Center, Archaeology of Down the Bay, the Old Water Street site by Chelsea Cook. That's 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Also free. Let's see. Tannehill on October 29th has another event. It's their Halloween event, Halloween Fairyland. There is admission for that. And let's see. Clark County Historical Museum has Pioneer Days on the same day, October 29th, and that's 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And I didn't get whether there was a fee for that or not. And then finally, on October 30th, the Blakely State Park Delta Explorer Cruise has a cruise to Bottle Creek, which is also another AHC site. So you have to sign up, through Blakely State Park to be a part of that tour.
I've never been to the Bottle Creek site personally, but I'm told that you have to take a boat to get to that one. Is that right?
You do. It's in the middle of the delta, surrounded by forever wild land, but also surrounded by water. So you do have to have a boat. It's on the William Bartram Canoe Trail that DCNR has on their website, the State Lands. It's on that canoe trail, but we don't have the landing marked, for obvious reasons. Although we do have the site monitored. I tell anybody that's going to visit the sites in its natural state, we've done a lot of tribal consultation. It's going to stay that way. There's a trail, but it's a dirt trail. It's often flooded. And right now we have a Save America's Treasure grant to do a hydrology model to address this flooding, as the climate, we see more big weather events. I've began to see, we don't have a formal trail up the mound. The tribes consider that sacred space and they don't want people up there. So, we're not going to build stairs up there or anything, but people have climbed up there, created their own trail. At this point, water's running down the trail. and I'm worried that eventually it'll wear through the clay cap on the mound. So we have we're about to do a hydrology study to address those sort of preservation concerns on Bottle Creek. But logistically, anything is a challenge because it's in the middle of the swamp.
Oh, the joys of doing archaeology in Alabama.
It is, and I mean, and there's a sort of a rough landing, and then you have to walk down a trail before you can get to it. Lots of palmettos, lots of, there's a lot of, we talked about earlier, I've seen alligators, I've seen a lot. I think I've been there one time that I haven't seen a water moccasin. So, but the worst thing, honestly, is the yellow flies.
Oh yeah, the yellow flies. For those of you who live outside of Alabama, yellow flies are, well, pretty much what they sound like. They're flies that are yellow and they bite badly.
Yeah, kind of like a horse fly, but I think they sting a little bit worse.
Yeah, I would agree with that. As somebody who's been bitten more than once, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a big issue at Bottle Creek. So when people call me about visiting, I always warn them. Usually the tours are done in the fall or winter. While there can be challenges with weather, it's just a nicer time to visit. And there's also wild hogs out there. So, anybody that's going on the canoe trail and going out there by themselves need to, just be aware. I don't know how dangerous they are, but you're in a wild environment.
We're wild about Alabama here. And there we go.
We are.
Title of the episode right there.
Wild about Alabama. Segue.
Well, Stacy, thank you so much for being here. I've really enjoyed having you on the show.
Well, thank you for all you do. I really appreciate the outreach you do around the state. That's great. Anything that's good for archaeology is good for all of us.
Oh yeah, I try. I mean, I like to be a good influence on my viewers, all of you, the 2,600 of you, if YouTube is correct.
Wow.
Which that number fluctuates. It's usually plus or minus 10, but last number was over 2,600.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I did not realize that. I'm impressed. But I was talking about the outreach you do physically too as well. You do programs to help educate, especially youth in Alabama, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, Stacy mentioned the Pope's Tavern Archaeology Club that has been spearheaded by myself and Brian Murphy. We've spent the last month and a half putting that together. So you guys are in Florence, you want to learn more about that, feel free to come by the museum and talk to us about it.
Please do. We used to have a program called Public Archaeology or Project Archaeology, which it was a nationwide program, but we did it in Alabama as well. That was sponsored by the Bureau of Land Management, and it just, I suppose when education started being focused more on standardized testing, enrichment activities sort of went away, and we didn't have a lot of interest from teachers. There's some from homeschoolers, but that's about it. So I really love programs that bring kids in, because I think that that's where it's very important to get the preservation ethics in the minds of the children early.
Yeah. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. I will see you a lot over the next couple of weeks, as it is still National Archaeology Month. I have a lot of interviews and a couple other surprises lined up, so be sure to stay tuned.
Thank you, Daniel.